Toyota Material Handling is now providing a factory rebate of up to $2,500 when you trade in a Toyota or a competitive unit. Now, through September 30th, 2024, trade in your forklift and get a new industry-leading Toyota forklift. This rebate applies to electric and internal combustion models. Unlock your upgrade today by visiting toyotaforklift.com. That's toyotaforklift.com, or click the link in the show notes. Are you struggling with drops in productivity, extended order cycle times, congestion in aisles, or excessive replenishments in your operation? If so, then you might have a slotting problem. On this bonus episode of The New Warehouse, which originally broadcast live on LinkedIn, I was joined by JJ Stanzik of MTE Consulting to define what slotting is, how to know you have a slotting problem, and how Warehouse Vision, a slotting and optimization software, can help you take your operation to the next level. Stay tuned in to learn everything you need to know about slotting.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
All right. And we are live here on LinkedIn, of course, because you guys are on LinkedIn and listening. And today, for the live New Warehouse podcast episode for this week, I'm joined by JJ Stanzik, who is the founder at MTE Consulting Partners, which is focused on warehouse utilization and optimization overall, all things we love about the warehousing. And today's title for today's podcast and topic is Empowering Tomorrow's Warehouse Today. That's today, increasing your warehouse vision with slotting. And we're going to be diving into the slotting conversation today. We're going to be defining what slotting is for people that maybe are not familiar. How do we identify and create awareness around whether we have a slotting problem, and how do we start to address that? And we're going to dive into a tool that JJ works with as well called Warehouse Vision. And we're going to talk about that Warehouse Vision, how it relates to court vision, a little bit in basketball too. And we're going to have a nice analogy in here and how it kind of builds foundation for the future as well. I know for myself around slotting, there's certainly a bit of a love-hate relationship. JJ and I were joking a little bit before we came live here, but you know, for me, I've worked on slotting projects throughout my career through inventory control roles, and certainly something that I see the absolute benefit to investing time into, but obviously sometimes a little bit of frustration when doing it through spreadsheets and manually. So JJ is going to talk to us a little bit about how to address that. But let me welcome JJ in here. So JJ, welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you. I'm great, Kevin. How about yourself today?
Doing well. I've been excited for this slotting talk. I see Michelle is on here, the slotting party that we're having here as well. Slotting festival, maybe something. It's a lot of slotting entertainment going on here. So why don't you kind of give us a little introduction of yourself, maybe a little bit about your background, and tell us a little bit about MTE Consulting.
Sure. Thank you very much. And again, thank you for the opportunity. I greatly appreciate this. So JJ Stanzik, I'm fairly new in the supply chain industry. I made my way in 2018, where I had started selling data capture hardware, the ancillary software that goes along with it, the media, the ribbons. And the other side of the business at that time was Warehouse Vision and slotting software. And I quickly gravitated towards it as I started to peel back the onion and understand really the impact it has on operations, the history, the cycle of, just consistent exceeding of client expectations. I don't know any salesperson or really anybody in business that has a chance to be on the side of something that really delivers on a need and addresses the pain points a client has that doesn't want to really tie themselves to it. So I knew early on when I came into Warehouse Vision that this was what I want to tie myself to and really be a part of just delivering those outcomes because it resonates company-wide. It's from floor workers, managers, to all the way up to the C-suite. You get to the other side of it and go live and people see those results, and that makes a difference. So I love being a part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a wonderful thing to have that kind of impact in an operation like that, because you mentioned, you can have an impact all the way from the on the floor worker to, the C-suite, and, kind of hit all different aspects of the operation and the company just in general by creating some of those improvements and coming in here. So we are going to talk a little bit about slotting, but I want to talk a little bit about kind of this analogy that you and I have kind of talked about over the last week or so as we were preparing for this conversation. I think, if we look at, and, recently we had the NBA finals, right, and basketball going on, and, you look at basketball, there's something called court vision, right? And for people that maybe are listening are not familiar with basketball or court vision in itself, I think there's a lot of relationship to the warehouse where, court vision is essentially being able to see what's happening on the court and what's going to be happening on the court. If I move the ball in a certain direction to maybe the right side of the court, like I know how the left side of the court is going to react, or, if this ball goes to this place, I know what the next play is going to look like. Is being able to kind of see that and also know where your teammates and your opponent is located at all times as well, and having that overall vision of what's happening within the court. And I think it's very relatable to the warehouse in a sense, which kind of lends itself to, the software, the warehouse vision, kind of in the same vein there. So I'm curious, JJ, I mean, your thoughts on kind of that analogy and how we look at the warehouse overall and have that same kind of vision.
Sure, absolutely. I love this analogy. I'm a lifelong hooper. I was fortunate enough to have a chance to play a little bit at the junior college I was at for a brief period in my younger days, but I just love it. So, you think of court vision as you explained it, it's essentially being able to see everything at once and not just what's right in front of you, but what's around the corner. You mentioned you pass the ball to the right as a point guard, that floor is going to shift, right? And at that point, as those things are happening, you're able to kind of put yourself in a position to where you're now in a better spot to either get the ball, make a pass and make a layup because you saw that shift, but where you can go to optimize your next step. And warehouse vision is very much like that, right? We enable the awareness and really the information that is important and integral to a warehouse to stay in shape, if you will. Once slotting gets out of line and that cycle of inefficiencies kind of takes hold, it's difficult to correct that and get it back on track. It's a question that many people are, they get overwhelmed with and they don't quite know how to tackle it. There's a lot of manual processes out there. I've heard of a lot of people that come up with their own really solid manual processes. But where we're able to kind of take it to the next level is through utilizing and leveraging warehouse vision. I've never quite seen a tool like it in this industry, really. You think about WMSs and they typically have limitations. And warehouse vision came about when a 40-year operations professional essentially saw where the WMS falls short and really identified the gaps between the WMS functionality and the reality of daily operations, right? He saw the shifts on the court. He saw the plays unfolding on the warehouse floor, and then where those gaps were, right? The people didn't have the vision to make the next move. They didn't know how to move, essentially, if you will, away from the ball, right? Pass and pick away, pass and cut. And he was able to actually teach himself SQL, if you can imagine that, and create warehouse vision. And at the same time, he went a step further and created a warehouse execution system that's also part of our suite of products. and both of which were implemented at a major Fortune 100 industrial distributor. And they quickly realized they could not operate without them. So it went from, his vision to actual warehouse vision. And at that point, one executive left, and it led to them saying, hey, we need you over here. And then somebody else left there and said, hey, we need you over here. And one of the things that really drew me to it when I first came into it, and I started kind of, like I said, pulling back the layers of warehouse vision, what it really was, I learned that they had 1,600 installations worldwide, all without a single outbound phone call. And as a salesperson, if you have a moment of where you kind of stop breathing for a second and you go, wait a minute, what? Like, okay, I like to sell things. I like to close deals. But how is it possible that someone has something that is so dominant and so comprehensive in terms of the efficiencies that it delivers? How do you not focus on it? And, I started MTE with the purpose of bringing this to the world, right? Shining a light on it, letting people know what's out there. There's really only a handful of players in the industry. And historically, over the last 24 years, when going head to head with them, we probably all know who they are if we're in the slotting world. Warehouse Vision would walk away with roughly 80% of the business. And if it didn't win up front, or maybe it wasn't made aware of the people that were doing the RFP, we typically be brought in downstream to replace the application that was underperforming and left the client underwhelmed, to then deliver really on their needs and give them the solution that they needed and beyond.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting story. And I know we had talked previously, and I talked with the creators as well with you at one point. And yeah, I think it's very interesting how it kind of developed and came together. But I think it is so important to understand that slotting piece and how that kind of comes into play within the operation and allows you to have that better vision, as we talked about, and understanding kind of the orchestration overall and all the moving pieces and everything that's going and getting things into the right place to be able to improve upon that. So I guess let's maybe take a step back a little bit and kind of give just a baseline understanding around slotting. So why don't you give us kind of what your idea of your definition of slotting is for people that maybe are not as familiar?
Sure. That's a perfect place to start. So slotting, through our eyes, is really the placement of product within a warehouse that optimizes the balance between warehouse utilization and operations. It's really as simple as that.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting, because I think if you look at it from a very high level, someone would say like, oh, well, very easy. Like, we just put stuff here, right? And we put stuff there, and and stuff goes in these different locations. But there's a lot of different complexities that can be added to it, and things that can go into place to be able to drive further efficiency, further optimization, and make like you said further in the beginning there, where you have a greater impact on the operation and the organization overall through these different techniques. So if we look at slotting, and some companies, some operations, they don't necessarily consider it at all, and in some cases maybe there's no awareness or whatever the case may be. But how do you identify that maybe you have a slotting problem, or that slotting is a potentially good idea for you to look at?
We'll be back after a quick break.
When it comes to systems, you want something that will start showing results fast. You're looking for a tool that can enable your 3PL or warehouse to get to the next level. So why wait? That's why Carton Cloud provides supported, fast onboarding that can have your WMS up and running in hours, not months. Jump into Carton Cloud's easy-to-use workflows for all of your services, including cross-docking, serialized inventory tracking, e-commerce order fulfillment, and more. This software is built by logistics people for logistics people, and those logistics people are standing by to help train you and support you so that you can be successful with your customer. With 24/7 real-time reporting and free online training, you need to check out Carton Cloud for your operation. Take the next step in your operation by heading to cartoncloud.com/free-demo or click the link in the show notes.
Sure. Top of mind, I would say your productivity is dropping. You're seeing extended order cycle times, congestion in aisles where pickers aren't able to smoothly move in and out of space and avoid others. Abundance of replenishments is a big one. You know, we want the warehouse for picking and a packing. When you're worried about replens all the time, you're missing something there. If you're underutilizing prime real estate, this is a big differentiator for us. So we really focus on optimizing square footage in the prime picking areas to where we don't look at items independently and we do not apply an ABC approach to it. We're looking at what items can be grouped together, to then satisfy the most amount of orders a day. And you see drastic improvement in terms of utilization. And we always start in those prime areas because that's the biggest bang for your buck. Also, people have a need for additional capacity more often than not, right? People are, I need space. Do I need to look at an expansion of my building, or do I need to look at a no facility altogether? We help people tackle that challenge without all the problems that come with it, right? We can help you stay in an existing facility. We can help you if you know you need that new one and you're going to it, we can help you right size that building, understanding exactly what, your item attributes, current order profiles are, future expected receipts. If you have an idea, if you're going to be expanding, or maybe e-com is really taking off, maybe you're working automation into your long-term plan of your operation. We can help people prepare for all of that so that once they open that facility, or, if it's new or even if it's existing, you think about getting an athlete in tip-top shape, right? If you're, the Olympics are coming up and you could lift all the weights and do all the running you want, but if you're still eating cheeseburgers, you are not going to be performing at top shape, right? You're not going to be the first one off the line, and you're probably not going to be the first one to cross it at the end. So we really empower operations to be the leanest, meanest version of themselves without a big, heavy lift on their team. So warehouse vision is going to run in the background. People don't need to visit the application. It reduces a lot of if you have a lot of heavy manual processes, that's another indicator that you might be in need, or it's worth looking at some sort of assistance in terms of how you slot and utilize your facility.
Yeah. And I think it's very interesting there too, some of the issues or pain points that you might be experiencing that slotting can help address. I mean, I think even the use case like you mentioned, where you're saying that there's a lot of congestion in an aisle or in a picking area, and pickers are waiting for other pickers to get out of the way so that they can pick the same item or an item next to it, or whatever the case may be. And I think it may seem like, oh, well, we don't have enough space maybe, right? Or we need to space people out more or something like that, or we need to make the aisles bigger or something like that. But as you said, the solution to that may just be a different slotting strategy, right? And I think, it's interesting too, you pointed out the ABC analysis, which is kind of like a traditional way of going about potentially looking at slotting and saying like, okay, well, all my A movers are going to be here, and then all my B movers are here, and then C movers are further away. But when you put all those A movers on top of each other, that's when you start to run into that type of congestion where you have people, getting backed up, or, depending on how many pickers you have, or if they're picking on equipment and machinery, now you really can run into some traffic issues there as well. So it's very interesting how you're looking at it in that sense, and positioning items to be able to address a lot of those issues, and then helping also, like you said, to right size those buildings and not get more space than you need essentially, and optimizing that overall. So I mean, why don't you talk to us a little bit kind of about, because you mentioned some of the manual processes in there, right? So I guess before we kind of dive further into warehouse vision and how that can make the process a lot easier around slotting, I mean, tell us maybe like traditionally, if we have some of these issues that you talked about, how would you start to address those, like from a manual perspective, or how would you do that without some kind of software or system tool to help make it easier?
Well, let me ask you this. I'll turn the table on you. When we first talked, you mentioned about your heavy experience with slotting and how it was typically very manual process driven.
Yeah.
I'd love for you to hear. I'd love to hear kind of what your experience was on that.
Sure. As I was asking the question, I had a feeling that you were going to turn it around on me, actually.
Dun, dun, dun.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, from the manual perspective, so there's a couple instances, different companies that I worked with where we didn't really have a slotting tool like that. We just had data, and we had to try and figure out some kind of plan around that data. And probably, I'd say the most complex slotting plan I had to do was a company that was distributing cosmetics and hair accessories to drugstores and grocery stores. And they would provide all that. And not only would they ship it out to the stores, they also had field reps as well that would come into the stores and do the replenishment of the shelf. So they would replenish all the Maybelline, Revlon, the Goody hair accessories, all that stuff. So in order to make their lives easier to do the replenishment in the field and get them in and out of the store quickly, of course, typically that usually means that it becomes more difficult on the process side of the warehouse or the fulfillment center to make their lives easier. From a slotting perspective, we had to slot things based on velocity. So we were looking at, what's moving quickly, because we had a setup where we had flow rack and then we had static like shelving, almost like book shelving in between the flow rack. So for the flow rack, we had more capacity there to put cases of product to pick from. So we had to take that into account, put faster moving items on the flow rack or on the pick shelf that was facing the flow rack, because that was kind of the main pick aisle in the pick path. And then also put the slower moving stuff kind of outside of that, because there was less capacity in the middle shelves themselves. So we had that as a kind of a first guideline, first constraint in a sense. And then on top of that, we also had to make sure that we were slotting things by brand, so that as they're picking into a case that was going to go to the store and then become replenished items in the store and on the shelves, that all one brand would be per layer. So in the bottom of the box, it would be all like Revlon, and then they would put a sheet on top, and then it would be all like Maybelline, and then so on and so forth. And that's where it became really complex. And we did all of this based on data that we were extracting from the system and sales velocity and sales volume, and just creating models in Excel, basically, which was it fun? Not really. To be completely honest, I think that's where the hate part probably comes from, the love and hate relationship with slotting that I have. Sure. But yeah, I mean, super, complex, and, we're talking maybe around like 12,000 active SKUs that needed to be slotted in that way. So huge amounts of data to try and get through and sort through, and obviously something that was not really easily adjustable and easy to move things around and analyze that data on a regular basis as we probably should have. So, sure. So that's kind of my experience there from the manual perspective, probably the most complex one that I've done.
Sure. So that's kind of the exercise we go through in the beginning conversations. Once somebody determines that they have a need, we dive in there and understand kind of how they're currently approaching it. And, for another analogy, we like to be the end user's Dr. Phil to bridge that love-hate relationship, right? And get in there, and we give them a better way to do it. If you think about it, during the setup, we're configuring this, considering every single attribute and every single exception that you might have or might want to have. When people ask us, can you consider the seasonality, but then also, some of these seasonal items we run promotions on? The answer has always been yes. And some people will say, geez, if you always say yes, doesn't that get, can you ever back yourself into a corner? And that answer is no. With the open architecture of the applications, we can consider anything you need us to consider so that we can figure it in a way. And it's a trial and error process, right? We're going through and we're doing data validation and we're providing reports up front and really dialing in, okay, are we nailing it here? Is there anything we're missing? You've talked about excessive replenishment and your desire for dialing in time supplies. We then model that and show them kind of what the outcomes are based on different considerations. And we really give someone a tool that the big advantage is that it reduces the manual hours. That seemed to me to be the biggest pain that came through in you explaining what you were going through, right? So all of that time is given back to the team members to then either be repurposed to work on more pressing matters or whatever it might be. Maybe they're going to move someone around, give them a different challenge, but it takes away the burden of having to consider and think and calculate all of that stuff. Warehouse Vision does it automatically. You mentioned 12,000 SKUs. I think there's one client out there using it right now that has over 775,000 independent SKUs in that facility. I believe our processing time to run through all of that is about 4 minutes. It took a little bit of time to dial that in, but when people hear that, and maybe they come from other applications where, they might set it on 4 o'clock on a Friday to process their 50,000 SKU facility, and they come back on Monday. I've heard this horror story before, and it's still not done. We can set that cadence to your desire to understand, if you have, there's the industrial distribution group it started at, they were getting 5,000 to 7,000 new products a month that were hitting the dock door. And it was almost impossible for them to handle that. And that whole process is automated. Anytime there's something coming in, we can punch in the expected receipts. Warehouse Vision is constantly running in the background to determine whether or not things are placed optimally. And, if we're saying, you hear a lot about digital twin technology, and I joke around and say, look, you hear about digital twins, we have digital triplets. So we understand we have your first view, right? What's the current layout in terms of storage media, opening sizes, level heights, where's the product? Then if we could wave the magic wand and understand, given that same layout, where should the product be? And then thirdly, this is where the application is working in the background to get you to slowly over time. What is the optimal layout? If we're not relegated to current level heights and opening sizes, we're not changing uprights, right? Nobody has to get in there and hire a contractor to do this. Your people are doing it. And then what is the optimal product placement on top of it? So with that in mind, anytime somebody says, hey, I'm at capacity, I think we might need to look at rearranging or reconfiguring some storage media in order to find more space, that's a click of the button away, because we always know what your first best step is in terms of reconfiguring to find additional space. And that's, that can be done in a matter of minutes within the application. You determine what storage media you want us to consider, or you want the application to consider. You move it over to the next box, you hit run, and the next thing you know, it's telling you exactly how much case flow, how much hand stack, how much pallet flow is required in order to optimize that space and best utilize it.
We'll be back after a quick break.
I hope you're enjoying this episode. Do you want more warehouse content delivered to your inbox? Sign up for our new email series called Warehouse Wisdom Wednesday to get an educational series of emails on warehouse basics delivered directly to you every Wednesday morning. Find the sign up link in the show notes. Yeah, and I think it's so amazing too. I mean, like you said, the 4 minutes, like processing that much data in that time is a huge.
It consistently blows people away, and it's actually fun to be in the room when you see it. One of the great stories of Warehouse Vision, where we had taken away some business from one of the really the most well-known independent solution out there. And we explained to them that's what they were going to be getting, right? They were going to be able to, I think they were 50 to 60,000 SKUs in most of their facilities. And we said that should be 3 to 4 minutes when dialed in. And everybody kind of just, laughed and snickered. And then we showed them and they went, oh, okay, well, that seems like it's going to help, and you talked about how do people address a slotting problem. And it goes back to that statement of many people find it overwhelming. And they're hesitant to get into it. They apply the manual processes they know. They apply the ABC. But really, the best thing that people can do, and typically what we do when we get in there is we focus on that prime real estate, moving the slow movers, the dead items out, replacing them with a combination of products. And like I said, not necessarily your highest movers, but what items that can be grouped together, best reduce the order cycle times, replenishments, satisfy the most amount of orders in a day. And that is your biggest bang for your buck, right? It's tough to get buy-in on that. One example I'll give you was a major home improvement big box store where we asked if we could just reconfigure 2 end caps along their racetrack, their main picking aisle. And again, it was kind of, whoa, all the red flags went up and you can't do that. It's going to disrupt operations and the pickers won't be happy. And we said, we understand. The perception is that this is going to throw a major wrench in your daily operations, but just give us a chance. Let's see what happens. And I think we configured 2 end caps. They were maybe 5 levels high. I think it was 2 feet deep, 4 feet wide, 1.5 feet high. And they had, 5 or 6 SKUs, right? One per level. We ran it through the application, considering the profiling of the orders, expected receipts, item attributes, everything. I think we walked away putting roughly 70 to 80 SKUs in those 2 end caps. And we were given a pilot to run head to head against the incumbent. It was supposed to be a month. They called it within a week when they saw the advantages gained by what we had done in just those 2 end caps. And that was it. That kicked off that relationship. It closed the deal. And that kind of cycle of success and, delivering on those outcomes is what Warehouse Vision has become known for. And it's just fun being a part of that. Like, who doesn't want to consistently deliver desired outcomes? It's just a neat thing to be part of. And really, I'm driven by that daily. I love being on that side of it. To me, it's not transactional. We get in there, we get embedded with these people, and we hold their hand and walk them through from the hate to the love side of it, and that's just neat to be a part of.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's such an impactful thing too. I mean, I talked about my kind of struggles there in some cases, and the idea of doing it manually too. I mean, I think one of the other negative sides of that is potentially by the time you're able to analyze that and then execute the plan and get through it, a lot of times everything has changed already, and you should already be looking at redoing the plan as well. So I mean, the fact that the Warehouse Vision is kind of running all the time and processing this, I think is a huge thing too as well. And I would say the time factor to be able to process that and then be able to execute on what's really going to make that impact at that time and make it better and have a great impact, like you mentioned, I think is so important to highlight there, because the project that I was mentioning, that I was talking about, I mean, that was like a brand new facility. So we were trying to set up that initial slotting plan and get that together, and I had a project partner on that, and we were working on that, and we would jump on Zoom and we'd be like, all right, let's work on this thing until one of us falls asleep. Basically, we'd be doing slotting at 1:30 in the morning, trying to get it ready for the go live of the building and get that placement in place. And I think, having something like this would have made such a huge difference. So very interesting to hear about kind of how Warehouse Vision and start to address some of these slotting things and really kind of make a huge difference in an operation and have that impact overall that you've highlighted here. So I'm curious, as we talk about this slotting and putting it in place and, driving better warehouse optimization and utilization, as we look at through warehouse vision and the slotting and being able to do that. I mean, how does that start to kind of create a foundational layer to start to look at newer technologies to be able to better, I guess, maximize implementations of different automations and robotics applications?
Sure. That's a great question. I'm glad you asked. So I'll go back to kind of that athlete analogy. When you go into something, if you're considering something like an automation integration, right, the first thing that comes to mind is the cost. There's a huge barrier to entry in terms of dollars, and people want to understand that what they're investing in, they want that court vision, right? They want to know what's going to happen after the integration, after the go live, after they load, what they think is going to be the ideal products to go in their time supplies, how to configure the bins, if it's, say an ASRS. And we best prepare operations so that when it's time for that big decision and you're getting ready and not just to do it, but to even consider it, we can help folks understand if it makes sense, number one, to consider automation for their operation. And then step two, if it does, what is it that you're looking to consider? We approach it from an independent perspective. We're not tied to any automation solution. They'll tell us, okay, it's these 7 solutions, right? And we'll say, okay, we're now going to consider your unique operation, right? We're profiling your orders. We're understanding that history, the patterns, the item attributes, the seasonality, the velocity, the promotional periods. All of that is taken into account. And then we can tell you, here are all of those 7 different solutions compared and contrasted. Orders ran through for the specific amount of time based on these conditions. Here are the outputs. This is what you gain. This is what you lose. Here's what makes sense. Here's, in our mind, what doesn't make sense. Once that end user then makes that determination of what it is they're going to go with, we can then take the next step of optimizing that solution, right? So let's just use an ASRS. We're going to understand what items are optimal for placement within. What's the optimal time supply, considering the order size? And again, going back to the profiling, what items should be co-located, right? If you have a lot of pallet picks and full pallet orders, you don't want to be spending the time that it takes for that ASRS to cycle through and get all that stuff out of there. And then if it does require a co-location, what type of storage media is optimal? How much of each of the storage types are you going to need to ensure that, that product is going to be stored in a manner that enables for the fewest amount of replenishments, right? And optimizing that order cycle time. The bin size, how many of each type, right? How to then break it down and divide each one internally with the little segments that you have available to you. So there's so much to it. And then at that point, we'll go back to that athlete on the starting line. We give you that finely tuned athlete that once that gun goes off and you flip the switch for go live, you are in your best possible. I mean, you're in fighting shape at that point. You're ready to go. You have no stone was left unturned. You've optimized every part of your body to be prepared to handle not only what you've seen in the past, but what you expect in the future. And then if the client installs the application, they're able to maintain that optimization of their huge investment to ensure that they're running at peak performance as the dynamic nature of daily operations continues to take its course, right? No 2 days are the same. They might be similar, but you're able to handle that and you're able to be flexible in terms of how you approach it. And it gives you that court vision of being able to see the things that are coming and to react in the best possible way, to really just be as lean and mean as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's such a great thing to talk about when we talk about automation and robotics, because I think there's a lot of maybe thoughts or just impressions out there that, if we drop in automation, we drop in robotics, like it's going to solve all our problems, right? But if we're not putting in that foundational layer, like doing something like optimizing our slotting first and, right sizing our buildings and, making sure we're doing as many things as possible to optimize our operation before we put that in place, then you're not necessarily going to see the benefits I think that you expect from robotics or automation, or maybe some of the top numbers that are being out there from like a marketing perspective around robotics and automation. I think, having those foundational core components are certainly something that's going to help drive that and make sure that that project is successful. And then, like you said, as the course of that operation evolves and continues, and different certain days are different than other days, and what they look like from an output perspective or productivity perspective, like you're still going to be able to have that visibility and see like, okay, is that investment in that automation or robotics still driving me to optimization? And am I still getting the full utilization that I expect or that I'm expecting to have from that? And I think that's a great thing to have there. So very interesting stuff with you here, JJ, and really appreciate you coming on and joining me today. Why don't you give us kind of some information about how people can connect with you, learn more about Warehouse Vision or MTE Consulting Partners?
Sure, absolutely. So you can give me a call directly. I think that's the best thing. Number being 847-942-4100. Email JJ at, and then just spelled out MTE, Michael Thomas Edward, Consulting Partners with an S.com. You can visit us on the website, www.mteconsultingpartners.com. You can follow a link there to connect with us, tell us a little bit about the challenges you're facing, to start that conversation, and really just kind of that discovery process that leads us to understanding what your challenges are, and where exactly we might be able to add value. I never guarantee it, but there's usually a good chance that we might be able to help. And that's what we do it. That's the fun part of what we do. We get to turn operations around and help them be the best versions of themselves.
All right. And that's a great place to be in, and very rewarding too, as you mentioned earlier in the conversation. And if people want to learn more about Warehouse Vision as well, you can reach out to JJ. Be sure to connect with him here on LinkedIn as well. We're on LinkedIn right now, so let's all connect with each other in the audience too, make our networks bigger, see how we can help each other. And there is a link in the details and description of this event too that you can click to sign up for our email list, and also learn out more information for Warehouse Vision if it's the right fit for you in your operation. So thank you once again to JJ, and thank you to everybody tuning in. If you want more New Warehouse content, just head to thenewwarehouse.com. Thank you, JJ. Enjoyed this episode? Make sure you are subscribed to the podcast, and for more content from the New Warehouse, find us on LinkedIn and YouTube. Links to subscribe can be found in the show notes, and for everything The New Warehouse, head to thenewwarehouse.com.